put this picture there because this fella that you see in the picture was on this island, and he did it deliberately. So this is sort of staged with the help sign, but he lived there for like 29 years by himself. However, and he had occasionally people did come to talk with him, obviously to take these pictures and so forth. But if you notice in the picture, he is alone in the context of he's the only human being that's there. But you also notice that there is a very clearly affectionate, loving dog. So is he truly alone? And I feel that this is the same thing with perfusion. There may not be another perfusionist in the room, but we're surrounded by some, generally speaking, really smart people who can be given direction or not perfectly do something, but figure things out enough. So yes, we're alone. At some places they do have these two perfusion groups, which I don't think makes any sense, but that's a different, I'll get into my, so you know the answer to, you know how I feel about it already. But again, he's alone, but he isn't alone. So let me move on from there. So there's a wide variability in employment models that currently exist. You have institutional and academic environments. You have community-based hospitals, which you may be employed by a medical group, private national contract groups, private community groups, private hospital groups, hospital employed, and then there's the independents or locums that travel all over the place and do all kinds of things. And each of these has different paradigms associated with them, right? The institutional or academic groups are generally going to have multiple people, groups of 15, 16, 17, even 20 or higher. And you have all of these people are always around. There's a lot of cases going on, but there's a lot of people around that are like you. The community-based hospitals, if you work for a medical group, you're employed by a medical group, group of physicians or something like that is kind of what I'm referring to, then, you know, it's generally going to be just enough staff. You know, those places, I think historically, they're doing it for a variety of reasons. Some of it is maybe steeped in stability, where in the past they had problems with the perfusion and the surgeons took over the perfusion practice and they know the people and they have them and they're close to them and they work together all the time and they prefer it that way, but they still don't work for the hospital. They work for this medical practice. And that certainly exists, I think, still in the country. It was bigger some years ago, but I think it still does exist. Private national groups have a different paradigm, but they have a perceived advantage in that we have whatever X number of perfusionists that work for us. But what's never really explained is that X number of perfusionists are not hanging in a closet on a hanger that you could just pick them out and send them wherever you need to send them. They're committed somewhere. And a lot of these smaller or larger, I take that back. A lot of these, let me rephrase that. A lot of these larger national groups actually have multitudes of accounts that are sole perfusion accounts in the middle of nowhere, where they can't recruit, they can't retain, and they need an outside service to provide somebody there. They might do very few cases, or they may do, you know, a minimum amount of cases, enough to keep the program open. It's mostly there for the cath lab. We know those places exist. And those places, yes, they could get somebody there, maybe if somebody is available, or they could get somebody that's licensed in the state or credentialed at the hospital, but there's logistical complications with just getting someone sometimes from, let's just say, I don't know, Eads, Michigan, from San Francisco to East Michigan is not easy to do. It's going to be a complicated trip, or to, let's say, Opelousas, Louisiana, or to some small place. There's no direct flights. So getting somebody there, if there was a problem, would not be that simple.
So you're not referring to vacation and planned, and you're talking about something in the moment.
Yeah, well, we're talking about is a soul perfusion practice safe? Right. That's yes. So in that context, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm referring to, there's a perception that they have all these perfusionists available should something happen, but it can't be an acute event. It has to be planned, right? So the perceived advantage really isn't an advantage. I think that's my point. Private community groups, they may be, they generally don't have programs that are sole, like there's just a sole isolated place. If they're a community group, then they usually have a cluster of hospitals, generally close to each other, where you can shift resources and assets around in order to cover all of the facilities, and probably can manage crises like I need help right now faster than can any of the preceding ones that I've just mentioned. Is when you have a cluster of hospitals that one team is responsible for, getting somebody to a hospital to help somebody's probably going to be faster than if you're on a big national level and you only have one account over here trying to get somebody in there in an acute situation.
Maybe not faster than people who are in one particular location.
Well, not I'm talking about the community. Institutional academic is going to be a totally different, they're first, okay? And I agree with you there, but that very good point. Private hospital groups, I think they have some advantage, okay, because you've got 4, 5, 6 people on your team, maybe 3 or 4, and you can call somebody at home and say, I'm really in trouble here, I need some help, and somebody's going to come help you, okay, as long as they haven't already started their wine and cheese party and are bottle 3.
Or you're not the entire staff is running with all the rooms.
Well, that's true too. That's a good point too. Hospital employed, and then the independent locums person. They're the people that probably are the most versatile of perfusionists that exist today. When you're institutionalized, as in an academic center, you become it's like, this is the only way I know to do this, and this is how I have always done it, and this is how I'm always going to do it. When you're medical group employed at one hospital, the same paradigm can occur. I think
it depends on how many surgeons that differ from each other, and caseloads that differ.
It would take a lot, because if you have, how many is a medical group going to have? 2 or 3 surgeons? I'm not talking about 10 surgeons. That's an academic institution when you have that many surgeons. I'm talking 2, 3 or something like that. Private hospital groups, hospital employed, independent, like I said, I think independent perfusionists are probably the most versatile of all the perfusionists that are out there, because they have to go someplace foreign all the time.
Figure it out.
And figure it out. And they do it very successfully. Because if they had a higher incidence of adverse events, then locums as an industry, and it is an industry, would not exist. So I think that, again, we're pretty smart. Perfusionists are pretty smart people. Lots of complicating factors. You've got credentialing, you have state licensure, you have integration of personnel, protocols, familiarity, you have distance to consider, and you have available housing. All of those things are factors in being able to get somebody, any clinician, from point A to point B. But what is the same, no matter where you go, no matter what hospital you walk into? Well, the circuit basics are the same. We turn blue blood red. That is what we do. You have a sucker. It has to go in the right way. It can't blow. You have cardioplegia. Cardioplegia is a formula. It's published. We all know what it is. You may have a vent, but at the end, you have to have oxygen going in there and sweet gas going in there, and it can't be occluded. There's things that are just, no matter what your circuit looks like, the fundamentals of the circuit don't ever really change.
Don't you think for some newer, less experienced perfusionists, that can be overwhelming? Because they've learned what they've learned wherever their first job is. And if they don't have a lot of diversity, if they're thrown into something like this, even if it's minor things, I think sometimes that can be a little overwhelming.
I think it can be too, but I think that that is sort of where I'm going with this in regards to my point. And but very good point, but I'm going to address that as I move forward from this. Physiology. Well, physiology doesn't change. There may be some very, minor nuanced physiology, I guess, if you're at high altitude or sea level, but it's minor and easily understood and manageable. But physiology, human physiology doesn't change from one part of the country to another, or from one part of the world to another, by and large. Anatomy doesn't change. The heart's going to be where it is. The cannula has to go on the right side, and there has to be something in the aorta or the femoral artery, the arterial system somewhere. The anatomy is going to be the anatomy. Sterile technique is sterile technique. We all know what it is. There's good sterile technique and there's poor sterile technique, and we've all practiced both most of the time. And there are going to be people. People will be there. And people are all, though different, people essentially are really the same. There are personality traits that each of us have, but even that there is somewhat of a limit to. We have categories. You look at psychology, and there's this kind of person and that kind of person, and any facility is going to have every single type of available personality types that exist have been categorized by these psychologists just in varying different amounts of one type versus another. So that's going to happen. The surgeons are all going to be, however, the same. They're going to be the way surgeons could be.
Big personalities?
Big personalities. The most important person ever.
Oh, Joe. That's you.
That's for Dr. Badia.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, I said it. I went there. I said it. That's for you, Doc. Okay.
Just showing lots of love to him.
Lots of love. So that's what I think is the same. What's different? Well, circuit design. Do you run on the left side? Do you run on the right side? Do you have a recirculation line with or without a one-way valve? Do you have a hemoconcentrator in it or not?
Do you bag or hard shell?
Bag or hard shell, exactly. Do you use VAVD or do you use gravity or siphon,
kinetic.
whichever, kinetic. Yeah, do you use kinetic? That's even worse.
Yuck.
Do you have VRVs in every one of your lines, vacuum relief valves in every one of your lines, or only the vent? What's first? Is it centrifugal or main systemic flow, and then cardioplegia, or is it and then vent, or is it main systemic flow, vent, sucker, then cardioplegia?
Or do you call them by colors?
Exactly. Who is responsible for what varies. Who manages the pressure? Is it the perfusionist? Is it anesthesia? Who's doing that part of it? How many drugs do we give? Who's monitoring the cerebral oximeter? Notwithstanding, I believe, and this is a personal belief, which I'd like to know whether you agree or disagree with me on this. I feel like everyone in the room is responsible for everything, not directly, but you're still responsible. In other words, if you see the pressure is 20, regardless of whether you are on pump or not on pump, doesn't make any difference. Anesthesia, the surgeon if he sees it, the nurse if he sees it, perfusionist if they see it, should be saying something.
Agreed.
We're all responsible for everything. If the cerebral oximetry numbers are in the tank completely, just because you're monitoring and documenting it, everyone in the room has a responsibility for that as well. Just not perhaps the direct responsibility, because that's just not how their system was built.
Well,
Do you agree with that or disagree?
I agree with that. I think people have certain responsibilities in the OR. We all have roles to play, but I think there should be interplay. Even if it's, say it's not something as important as the patient's hemodynamic numbers. Even if it's, I don't normally turn the bovie up and down, but no one's in here and the bovie needs to go up or down. If you know how to do it, do it.
Well, that's so funny. It's a very good point. And I'll bring this up. This was a case that I did some years ago. And I don't remember exactly why we ended up on fem-fem, but we ended up on fem-fem. And they had the chest opened up, and because something happened in the process which was unexpected. And they have the chest opened up, and the aorta is falling apart. I don't remember if it was a co-arc. I don't remember what the thing was, because we usually do left heart bypass for that. So I just don't remember what the whole circumstances behind it were. But I remember seeing the surgeon. I didn't hear what he said, but I saw the nurse hand him a big cross clamp and an aorta clamp. And it got my attention, and I kind of looked up, and I saw him going in there with this vascular clamp, big aorta clamp, and the heart wasn't beating. And so I said, listen, I don't mean to interrupt you, but what are you fixing to do with that clamp? And he said, well, the aorta's falling apart. I've got to clamp it. And I said, yeah, I understand. I said, but we're femorally cannulated. How are we going to perfuse the head? Oh, yeah, that's true. Thanks. And we went and made some adjustments. He was focused.
Absolutely.
And he was just, this tissue is falling apart. I'm a surgeon. I need to fix this.
Yeah.
I could have been in la-la land, not paying attention. Probably would have still had flow. I'd have perfused the lower part of the body, but, what would have happened up at the top? And so that's what I'm talking about, is being aware. We're there to do a specific job, but we all should be watching everything that's going on and be aware.
Especially, it's paramount that everyone is aware of anything that's for safety.
Yes.
For patient care safety,
yes.
Everyone needs to be a part of it. That's why everyone needs to be on in the room, whether it's your turn to be doing something or not. Because sometimes someone can be really focused or in the moment of an emergency, and they're not thinking as clearly as they might normally.
Right, they're focused at the task at hand.
Right.
Not the peripheral requirements. Exactly, that's a very good point. I'm going to address that too as we move forward with this. People and politics, that's another part of this. Every team, like I said, every hospital, every department has people with all different kinds of personalities. You may have a higher percentage of very friendly personalities. You could have a higher percentage of standoffish personalities. You can have a higher percentage of aggressive personalities. You can have a higher percentage of just, unhappy people, if it's just a malignant place that you've ended up for some reason. But you can have it all. And I think that that's people. People come in every shape and size and color and personality and everything else. I think that's just part of being a human being.
That's a part of working anywhere on any team.
And understanding the way people do things there, how they talk, how they speak, what
the expectations
what vernacular they use,
right?
Which is coming up, whether they say, sump up, vent up, whether they say green up, blue up, or whatever their vernacular is, how they talk, how they give communication.
Give me volume, fill up the heart,
yes,
all of those things.
Exactly. Where supplies are kept, where the bathroom is. Those are the things that are different, but you know what? They're really important.
They are.
Especially when you gotta go and you're on pump and you've got to go now. You don't want to be getting somebody to help you, which I have done before, handed them a clamp, had it open, taught them how to make sure they knew how to open and close it. If this gets to here, clamp that line. I'll be back really fast. And run out the door. You don't want to run out the door and then go,
where's the bathroom?
Where is it? And spend time looking for it.
Right.
You got to take care of business. So there's, generally speaking, unless you're in California, which has a legislated law that says you have to have 2 cardiac surgeons doing one heart.
Oh.
There always has to be 2 cardiac surgeons in the room.
Really?
Yes.
Do they have to be scrubbed in?
Yes.
Oh.
Another cardiac surgeon has to be the first assistant.
Gotcha.
Now, the Society of Thoracic Surgeons, from what I understand, and talking to some folks who may have been involved with that, does not think that's a good idea and really is against it. However,
especially with the shortage.
It's done because there are so many cardiac surgeons. It was actually enacted as a rule to protect cardiac surgeons back
when
in
we
the
had
day.
an excess.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And too many of them in California. So it really doesn't provide, there's no real advantage, mortality advantage, morbidity or mortality advantage for the patient at all. And that all then becomes the who's in charge. So we're kind of getting back to the sole perfusionist, dual perfusionist mentality and so forth, but we'll get there. So what is the difference? Usually there's one surgeon, one anesthesia. Usually you don't have 2 of them doing any one procedure, unless it's a disaster emergency or something like that where they're pouring fluid in the patient. They just need an extra set of hands. Generally speaking, it's one person, one case. But you can get anybody to help you. I mean, how many times have you pumped blood into a patient? Have you never done that? Have you up at the anesthesia to help them get the patient fluid or blood resuscitated? Certainly we've all done that. So what is the difference? Well, what do other major industries have? Well, mass transit. Usually for aircraft, for commercial airliners, you will have a pilot and a co-pilot, and sometimes you'll even have 2 pilots and 2 co-pilots if it's a trans-oceanic flight, very long distance, and they're going to be, they need to sleep.
And is a co-pilot equal training to a pilot? I mean, they're the same, they're just having different roles, or?
No. So the training is certainly similar, but it comes down to tenure.
I see. But a co-pilot knows how to do everything a pilot knows how to do. They just are lower on the totem pole.
Correct.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
But but you also have a navigator on the flight as well, depending on the flight, or an engineer, a flight engineer. Sometimes you have a load master. There's a lot of depending on how big the aircraft is, how far it's traveling, what its purpose is. But
a navigator is not a pilot.
Correct.
He could not fly the plane. Maybe he shouldn't normally, under normal circumstances, ever be responsible for flying the plane.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Probably could, but doesn't. Right. And so, or systems engineer, we'll call them that. Okay. But those are different circumstances. You have, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but a 747, a 777, a 777 or a 787, these are really complex aircraft with a lot of systems and a whole lot of buttons and a whole lot of dials.
A whole lot of people.
And at one time.
Yeah.
One person, it's just too much. It's too overwhelming. You have to have 2, 3 people available to be able to
Probably can't look
manage.
at all the dials.
You can't. And if you're trying to fly the plane, should something happen, you really can't look at all the dials. You're trying to troubleshoot things, and there's checklists and so forth. So aviation is really not, in my view, a good example to use for the argument that there should be 2 perfusionists in one procedure. But I'll tell you something about the airlines, and this is also the case in big ships, aircraft carriers, whatever. There's a lot of big-time officers on that ship. But on an airliner, which is what we're talking about, you have what's called the PIC. That is the pilot in command.
Okay.
Doesn't matter what aircraft you fly, how big it is or how small it is, there is a PIC, a pilot in command. And there is only one.
Like a captain.
Yes, like the captain of an aircraft carrier.
Okay.
There is only one. At some point, every decision is made by that one person. Gotcha. You can give input, you can suggest, but if your aircraft literally was flying and there was a problem and the aircraft was out of control, the co-pilot would never take over flying the aircraft from the PIC, the captain of that aircraft. That captain will fly that aircraft, and that co-pilot will fly with him, along with all the passengers, to the ground.
Gotcha.
Or to the ocean, or to whatever's going to happen. Because it is much more understood to be much more unsafe to have
differing opinions,
discussions, and disagreement about what to do in a crisis and an emergency. And so trains, usually you have a conductor, but then you have an engineer, okay? But buses, streetcars, cable cars, they're mass transit as well. They're carrying a lot of people. There's one driver.
Yeah.
Greyhound bus has one driver.
Yeah.
There's not 2 drivers. Now, sometimes there may be a second driver there to take over so that person can have a relief, but that's not quite the same thing that we're talking about. There's not duality going on there. And then, of course, regular cars. You know, unless you have a Tesla. I have Tessie drive me, but nevertheless, if you have a Tesla, you know, you're still driving the car. You're responsible. The driver's responsible for driving the car. So how often has a CCP become incapacitated on pump? Because that's really what we're trying to discuss here. Well, after an exhaustive review of the literature, and I looked everywhere I could think of, I called people that I know, I checked with insurance claims, I found nothing. Doesn't mean nothing exists.
Yeah.
I found nothing.
But we've all heard stories.
I've heard stories.
But it's never for me anyway, from the primary source that knew that was there when it happened.
Right, exactly. But I can find no documentation. I can't find a lawsuit that was the issue. I can't find an article that was written about it that specifically pointed to a specific case that was provable, okay? But what about the surgeon? And this is where I think this gets really interesting.
Okay.
I know a surgeon who was having angina, active angina, during a procedure. Called the cardiologist, nurse put the phone up to his ear, said, hey, you know, are you available to do a cath, you know, in a little while? Wanted to know who the patient was, and he said, me. Had to get a couple of stents. So was having active angina during the procedure. I know a surgeon who was on pump, and I was physically there, that had the proclivity of running from one side of the table to the other side of the table for some inexplicable reason. And they had those big towers that came out of the ceiling with the various plug-ins.
Yeah.
Ran into it because he had his loops on his headlight, was looking down, didn't see it, and knocked himself completely unconscious, had to be hospitalized with a severe concussion, was not going to recover to be able to finish the case. And we were on pump with the cross clamp on.
Oh.
So I have firsthand experience. Now that's two. Still, I have none with a perfusionist, but I have that. Now I've heard of perfusionists, like maybe you have too, that have left the operating theater and gone and committed suicide.
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
I heard of someone having a heart attack. I don't know who that someone is. And I heard that anesthesia came to help and try to control the pump, but wasn't proficient, and there was an accident. But I don't know any of that to be certainly true. It's just one of those things you've heard about.
So of all the heart surgery with cardiopulmonary bypass that has been done, because I don't want you to give Dr. Badia any ideas. See, that's why we don't use the pump. Yeah, he would be so much better a surgeon if he would just put the patient on pump. But of all the cases that are done, you've heard that story. You don't know where it was, or do you?
I heard New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Again,
okay,
I don't know.
Heard, right. So if this was a prevalent thing, we'd hear more about it.
I think the reason people, or why it's talked about, is because many people who we work with on a daily basis in cardiac surgery don't know enough about what we do, so it's frightening to them. Because there's a lot of moving parts, even though we can look at a pump and we see what's necessary and what we need to see, and it's just an in and an out, and they see a lot of moving parts, and I think can be scary to them.
Well, that's going to be part of the discussion, because I have a good idea about that.
Okay.
I thought about that. Okay. So, and then what if it did happen?
Yeah.
Well, I think you saw, it depends on where. You saw the guy that has been, that was on the island. You're alone, but you're really not alone.
Yeah.
Okay. So unless you're in some isolated part of the world where you can't get any help or assets to you to help, if it's in a larger metropolitan area, or it's in a place where there may be two programs, or even if you have somebody that you work with, you're a community-based, hospital-based perfusionist, there's going to be someone, unless you're the only one, but then there's somebody that's going to be in the town over. Somebody can get on the phone, and of course, with telemedicine and with FaceTime, HIPAA goes out the window.
Yeah.
At this point, FaceTime, and right now, of course, it's COVID, FaceTime is acceptable. Okay, all HIPAA standards have been sort of pushed aside for the sake of taking care of patients, which is the right thing to do. I completely agree with it, and I don't think HIPAA is a bad thing. It's a good thing. But I understand, the point I'm trying to make is that technology has changed so much that I think, you could get on the phone with someone and at least keep a stable environment long enough to get somebody there.
Well, I think specifically, speaking just from our perspective, a surgeon knows how to clamp lines.
Yes.
But
if they're doing an aortic valve or a mitral valve,
sure,
that's a different story.
Yeah.
It all depends on when this happens.
No, of course. But I also think, too, that probably the surgeon could help direct the nurse or someone to just do what had to be done for the moment to get the patient to a safe place. Do you think so, or am I thinking about?
No, I think so, but I don't think.
It's not ideal.
Yeah, I think surgeons know how to clamp lines, but I think anesthesia knows how to clamp lines.
Well, maybe.
No, that's true. It's not ideal, but
nothing's ideal. A plane crashing is not ideal.
Right. If something has to be clamped and you're FaceTiming with perfusionist X from somewhere else,
sure,
and they're saying, okay, look, nothing personal, but you don't know how to handle a clamp. I need the surgeon to clamp that line for you. And you can get them through it, okay? Because really, if you're just going to stay stable, like anticoagulate the patient, give them more heparin, somebody's on their way.
Yeah.
If the level goes down, I'm going to stay with you. We're going to stay on the line the whole time until somebody gets there.
Yeah.
The level gets low, add volume. Let's just send a lab. Draw it from the patient, so that you're not drawing it from the pump, so somebody doesn't turn the stopcock the wrong way. There's definitely ways to work around this.
Sure.
And, talk somebody through keeping the patient stable, alive, and, and with a positive outcome at the end. That's of course, that's my perspective. So that's what I think if it did happen. So if it did happen, the answer is you get on the phone and you call somebody right away. Somebody, another perfusionist. But the key is to use technology to your advantage.
Well, and to have already thought about what would I do if.
Yes.
We do that anyway.
I think we do it. I think that's how we were trained. I don't think the surgeon knows, and I don't think anesthesia knows. The surgeon knows what if such and such happens during the procedure.
Sure.
If I find this or this or this, what am I going to do? But they don't think about that for the pump.
This is part of the emergency plan that the team should already have in place.
Yes, precisely. So, what is much more likely a risk for the patient? Well, this Utah woman bled to death into a garbage can during a botched surgery, and it had to do with more than one perfusionist involved in the procedure, and a who is doing what and where are you in the procedure.
Right, what has been done
so
already.
I was unable to find anything where there was a documented poor outcome associated with having only one perfusionist, but I was able to find something that attributed the problem to too many cooks in the kitchen. Causes of accidents, what are they? Sobriety. In fact, I will say this, my own personal experience is that when I have had problems, the problems were exacerbated by having someone else inserting their thought about what to do.
I think it depends. I've been in maybe a tricky situation, trying to figure out, you're troubleshooting something. Maybe it's not endangering the patient at the moment, but something's not working the way it should or behaving the way it should, and you're trying to figure it out. I think if you have relationships already established with people and you get that person in there and you have experience in knowing how others work, I think it can be very helpful. Now, is it absolutely necessary? No, but sometimes it feels good to say, I'm thinking this, and this. What do you think? But I do agree with if things are going to
south.
Yeah, they're going south quick. More people barking things out can break your train of thought and can
confuse the matter. That's why there has to be. There's a PIC, pilot in command. There should be a PIC, perfusionist in command. If you want to relinquish that command to someone else, then you do it. If they want to take the responsibility, look, I can fix this. You got to get out. Let me handle it. Okay, it's yours. Then you do whatever they ask. You follow direction. You don't also try to fix it because you may be trying to fix it two different ways. Both will work, but you're fighting against each other now at this point.
Well, even in something as simple as, let's say, end of the day, you got 4 pumps to set up. You work in an institution, lots of rooms. 2 perfusionists there, 3 perfusionists there, and everyone's like, let's just get this done together. I think even then, in my experience, it's best to say, I'm going to handle this part of the pump, you can handle that part of the pump, because if you don't know what someone else has done, even if you've worked with them a million years.
Yes, and we are creatures of habit.
Yep.
No question about that.
I do this, this, and this
And that goes
in
back
this
to
order.
familiarity.
Yep.
You have to be familiar with what you're doing. Exactly.
I agree.
And what you're comfortable with. So causes of accidents, common causes. These are documented as well. Sobriety is, believe it or not, an issue. Tiredness, not necessarily perfusion.
Oh.
Just
Okay.
causes of accidents in general. Tiredness, not having enough rest. That's why pilots and air crews can only work a certain number of hours before they have to be off. It's mandated. It's the law. That's why you have, on these long flights, you have 2 sets of air crews. One is sleeping while the other is flying the plane, and vice versa. And that includes the professional flight attendants who are managing in the back. They have the same rules, because it's all great when all they're doing is handing out,
Yeah.
they
have an important role to play.
But when it's all going south, they are the ones trained to know what to do. And being tired is not going to be helpful. Time? Oh, we're running out of time?
No, I have 15 minutes more. You have a lot of slides.
I'm sorry?
You have a lot of slides.
Oh, okay.
Stop talking,
Illness,
I think.
going to work sick, inattention, lack of good communication. That's a big one. When you're doing hand signals to communicate going on pump, like somebody that goes like this, and just because you work together all of the time and you go on pump and you know that that's what that means, it doesn't make it right, and you don't respond back. It doesn't make it right.
In that, I think everybody I've ever talked to, now whether they do it in their practice or not, was trained to, you repeat every command, and that includes non-verbal commands.
Absolutely. And I think
So
that we
you'd like
should all
me to
do
go
that.
on pump?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going on pump. Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me see. When are we supposed to finish today? Oh, 4:30. Okay, so we have 15 minutes left. Okay. Lack of good communication, unfamiliarity, indifference. Some people just don't give a heck. Poor training and poor experience, or lack of experience, of being thrown into a circumstance that you're just not prepared for. That goes back to your original point, which is a new grad should not be put in a program that is a sole program, because it's heart surgery no matter what, and the aorta can fall apart no matter what, and now you're in what looked like going to be a simple 2-vessel, chip shot, turns into an ascending aortic repair with retrograde cerebral perfusion, and you now have to set it up while you're trying to do this case. And at that point in time, your vaporizer decides to spring a leak. And now you've got even more problems. So you know what? That's not the time to be doing that. That's not what they should be doing. So let's divide this into two parts. Is it safe for the patient? Is it safe for the perfusionist? The patient. Is there substantial enough risk to the patient if there is only one perfusionist readily available? If you believe that answer is yes, then should the patient be consented, have informed consent that there will be only one perfusionist on your case? If you think no, well then clearly no consent is needed. And of course I believe no, as I said. And is one perfusionist per case the same as one perfusionist in 100 miles? I would argue no. They're not the same. They're not equivocal. When somebody is 10 minutes away versus 100 miles away, that's not the same thing. Just because they're not in the room, sitting with you, playing on their phone, being distracted, and doing nothing because you're doing the case at the end of the day. So I'm going to say something that's a little controversial, and I apologize for that, but this was a presentation that was given by Gary. He's since retired. And I think it's one of the, I think it lacks insight. I think it's a mistake to have made this statement. But one, to perform they're talking about airlines and so forth, but he makes a statement: if you pump by yourself and don't think you need help all the more. And that really hit me the wrong way. It bothered me, because I think that is fundamentally incorrect and lacks insight. That's my view. Again, I'm being controversial, and I like Gary. He's a nice person. I just think he's fundamentally wrong. And I don't think this should be said, because you say things, they become guidelines. And if we had that guideline now, guess what? We wouldn't have enough people to do all these cases. There's consequences to things. But I also think, again, going back to patient injury, and that one that I showed you with the Utah women bleeding out, that actually is only one example. There's more. It was easy for me to find.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to belabor the point, and I didn't want to kind of, focus on that, but I'm just going to tell everybody right now. There was plenty to find where having two perfusionists trying to do one case had deleterious effect, deleterious impact. I could find it easily. Couldn't find anything documented that only having one has that same problem. So I just fundamentally agree with it. Overconfidence, he says, is what sank the Titanic, not the iceberg. Come on. I've done, I don't know how many thousands of cases I've done. I've done a lot of cases in my life. Every single one of them I've done by myself.
I think he has a point about overconfidence can be very detrimental.
True, but he's putting it in the context of
I don't
you
agree
don't
with,
need a second person.
Right, I don't agree with that particular
I do think
application.
people that are overconfident, but, at the same time, I will tell you this. If you don't, and I don't mean to sound, this may not sound right. Best surgeons I know, they're nice, they're easy to get along with, they're really, inclusive, and they ask for input from people. But the best ones, from Cooley on, Cooley, I won't say the other names, I'll just use Dr. Cooley because he's well known, and God rest him, he's a great guy, incredible surgeon. Mm-hmm. But the good ones got a swagger. And you know it as well as I do. They all do. Mm-hmm. They got a certain edge to them. And that edge is a confidence. And I think perfusionists are the exact same way.
I agree. The overconfidence, I think, where you really have to be careful is you're overconfident, not necessarily in your abilities, but of assessing the situation that you're in and becoming too comfortable. So then if something doesn't go according to, or you think this is what the surgeon's gonna do because he's always done it this way, you've worked together forever. I think that's where it can be a
Is that
real
overconfidence or complacency?
I think it's a combination of both, because you're so confident that you know the routine and you know what's gonna happen that you are complacent.
Okay, fair enough.
All right.
Okay, lifestyle considerations, time off, sickness, accident, injury, unable to be reached, family events and holidays. These are other things that you have to think about when you're in a sole perfusion practice. Okay, you could be sole perfusion practice, be perfectly healthy, have not been in an accident, but they can't reach you because something happened with the cell phone service.
Yeah.
That can happen too. So this is kind of going from the patient, is to say for the patient. Okay, so we're going to transition from that to obviously the perfusionist. A small practice somewhere most people don't want to live. Generally speaking, you find that, so it's very hard to recruit. There's economic considerations. A small practice with 2 CCPs and the capability of 2 rooms means each one of you is doing a case by yourself, even though you're in the same room together, or the same operating theater together, but not in the same room, okay? What about when you have ECMO? What about autotransfusion cases, all right? The hospital should understand the limitations and have a strategic plan. See, I just took this from you. I knew what you were going to say. It is the perfusionists, the department or company leadership that should inform and advise administration and have it documented of what are we actually able to provide. How far away is the closest perfusionist from you? Are they credentialed, and if not in the same state, licensed if that's required in that state? What is the actual availability, and is it dependable? So just because you have 500 perfusionists working for your company doesn't mean you have 500 people that are 499 of them readily also available at a moment's notice. It's not reality. Does anyone else in the team know enough to provide a safe environment until help arrives? That's what I think we should be focusing on.
Agreed.
How do we teach our anesthesia colleagues, surgeon colleagues, nurse colleagues how to help if something were to happen to one of us? We do not spend enough time with what you talked about, cross-training essentially, without training. This is just a familiarity so that if something happens, you're not completely unawares.
One of the best employment experiences I've had working for a surgeon who was wonderful and knew lots of things. You were very comfortable if you were in the room with him. Believed that. It was an academic institution, and he believed before his fellows left, they were going to learn about the pump. Would they know how to run it completely? No, but he wanted them to have a general idea, so when they went out into the world, wherever they were going to end up, that's one more person that could be educated in an emergency situation.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. Very, very good point. So is it safe? In my opinion, yes, it is safe. In fact, my opinion is it is safer. That is my opinion. Could it be made even safer? Yes, it could be by what we just discussed. You know, the fact that that we should be, people should be at least comfortable enough to be just on the phone with somebody, FaceTiming somebody, which goes to telemedicine. Another great way to make this safer is every hospital, they have it, every hospital has one of those robots of some sort, or everybody's got a phone. Everybody can FaceTime, or some iteration of that, okay? Skype, whatever it is on your phone. There is a way to get competent help guiding you, but you should have that as a plan.
Like a disaster plan.
Before it happens.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There should be something on the pump that says, if the perfusionist keels over dead, call this number.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's silly, of course. You wouldn't say it that way. If the perfusionist becomes incapacitated for any reason, call this number for the emergency plan, or open these instructions, do something.
We had that in all of our rooms when I worked in an institution. Every single perfusionist phone number was available in that room.
We should have that. We should have that too. And we don't, and we need it.
Yeah.
So you need to let, I'll let somebody know.
People need to know.
Have that. People need to know. Your people need to call my people and let them know.
What if they're the same people?
It is not for everyone. Yeah. Being in a sole perfusionist environment, and when I say that, I'm talking about you're the only perfusionist in the hospital, in the program. Not that you're doing the case by yourself, that you're the only one within 100, 200 miles. You're it. Like you're in Wyoming all by yourself. And there's nobody there that's going to help you.
Right.
It's not for everyone. And you shouldn't take that job if you don't feel you have, and they shouldn't hire you, if they don't feel you have the requisite experience, because they're putting the patient and you
not just experience
in the wrong
personality
place.
Too.
Yes.
It's not right for some people.
Yeah, some mariners, it's not right for them.
Yeah.
Right. If you drink a lot, it's not good for you.
Or even if just you don't like the feeling of being isolated.
And alone.
Right.
Right. And you know what? And there's nothing wrong.
No.
And I'll tell you this much too. There's nothing wrong, and I've done it. I do it more now. Of course, I do it a different way now. But there's nothing wrong with calling somebody up and saying, hey, I got to do this case tomorrow. And I see this as potentially getting out of hand for me. Do you mind just coming and just being around in case I need some help? Just chart for me or do something like that. Give them certain instructions. That's not a sign of weakness at all. That's a sign of being confident and strength. And I think that should be not something people fear doing. They should welcome that.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. We're all in this together, okay? So it's not for everybody. At the end of the day, I think that it is perfectly safe to do. So I've run my slides out. We've finished the discussion.
Do we have any questions? Comments?
There's comments, and that is, I'm a pilot. This is also from Borgness, and can answer this. Captains, first officers are equally qualified to fly the plane and have the same certificate.
Okay.
The captain has more experience, but they swap roles during the flight, depending on, the captain could say, it's your plane, you could fly it, you could land it, you could do whatever you want. They'll do that now and again. This, in the U.S. at least, it is different in some countries. So that might be regarding the pilot thing. So I don't have any questions on FaceTime or Twitter?
Not so far.
Not so far? Okay. Well, then, you know what? Let's talk about what we're going to do tomorrow real quick. Tomorrow, you're going to have me. You're going to have, via Skype, Dr. Samir. He's always great. And Matt Warhoover, the chief of perfusion or the director, I think, of the perfusion department at Vanderbilt.
Right.
And he's also the president of the Tennessee Perfusion Society. He's doing an organ harvest today, as a matter of fact. I texted him earlier. Matt, I'm looking forward to talking to you tomorrow. And so they're all going to come in via Skype. It's going to be me. I'm going to be over at the podium, Dr. Samir, and Matt. So that's going to be our program tomorrow. And then Monday, we start the Corona 30. Remember, for those of you who might have any kind of financial hardship, you can send us an email. Somebody's already done this. And we will give you the Corona 30 programs at no charge, including the CEU certificate. So you can get that if something has happened and you are really in trouble and need your certificates and you've had a financial hardship because you've been furloughed or cut to halftime and you got a family that your bills don't change. They say they do, but they don't. I can assure you, don't pay your rent, they're going to evict you.
Yeah.
They say they're not going to, but they're going to. And you're really not going to get that money back.
No.
That's something that really bothers me too, is, somebody can keep a person employed, give you 75% of cuts your salary by 20 or 25%, which I know a lot of places have done that, still be compliant with the PPP, get the PPP, that 25% makes an enormous difference to as an employee, depending on, where you are in the overall economic, pyramid. But that could be more than you can bear in terms of buying food, medicine, healthcare, paying rent or mortgage or whatever the case may be. And at the end of the day, you don't get any of that back. So you still owe the money. You might not get evicted, but if you can't make your rent, guess what? You're going to owe it. And you're going to have to pay it eventually. So that's a real problem. So we've got the Corona 30. Check it out on perfweb.us. We've got some great programs, really neat topics, some incredibly talented speakers coming. Not me. I've got them doing a few of them, but we've got some good speakers. Tammy, you're going to be on several of them as well. You're going to talk about what is coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, and COVID-19. So I'm going to think I'm very interested in that, especially with the new information that's coming out about that. But we're going to talk about a lot of other things. We don't want the program to just be about COVID-19.
No.
We don't want to only talk. We have to discuss it when we know something that is of value, but we don't want the program to only be that. There's just a whole world that's still going on right now. And one of my talks, in fact, we're going to be talking about patients that have fallen through the cracks. So that's a discussion for another day, but it's a big discussion point that I'm concerned about as far as our healthcare delivery system and what we did in essentially shutting everything down except for you have this one particular viral syndrome. I'm worried about that, but we'll discuss that during the other programs. You want to put something up on that screen besides just a blank screen? Like our PerfWeb thing? Or something?
I'm going to be talking about high-stress jobs in nutrition, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, high stress. Yeah, there you go. That is actually really good. I'm going to see if I can get Dr. Jones to do the update on the cannabinoids.
Oh, okay.
But I think that is important. And for those of you who don't know me, I've lost, almost 49 pounds, 48.9 pounds. So I lost a lot of weight. Feel a whole lot better.
We're going to call you Slim Jim.
And yes. And,
Slim Jim Joe.
But it's really changed my whole outlook on things. So I'll be interested to hear. But it's very easy to eat Fritos when you're stressed.
Well, sure.
It's a lot harder to have cut an avocado up when you're just stressed.
Well, and even with the situation a lot of people are in now, they're eating, emotional eating, because they're home and they don't have anything to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stressed. Maybe
Yeah.
they're stressed about their job or just stressed in general about what's going on in our economy or health.
I'm stressed.
Yeah.
I think all of us are. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow morning at, what time do we start tomorrow?
I think it's early. 7:45?
7:45. We'll start. We'll see y'all tomorrow. So opening remarks will start about 7:55, a couple of minutes before 8 o'clock. And then we'll go right into coronavirus implications for perfusion. See you all tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you all so very much. Don't forget the social media stuff, like, follow, subscribe, thumbs up, all that kind of stuff. We really need that support from you, but we just appreciate you all so much watching our programs, hopefully learning something. We'd like for you to be more a part of the conversation besides chatting or texting. Call in every once in a while. Would love to hear from you. Don't forget, if you want to be part of the faculty, you want to be a sponsor, either one, that email address, contact@perfusioneducation.com, always available. You can always reach out to me. I'm easily found. So thank you all, and have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.